Welcome to Gnana Deeksha, concept-based digital learning. Today I am here to discuss the topic demand and law of demand. Before going to explain the concept demand and law of demand, let me give you an example so that you can understand the concept very clearly. During summer, which is the most awaited fruit in the market? Yes, mangoes. During the initial days of the season, the prices of the mangoes would be very high. Why? Why it is very high? Any guesses? Because the supply of mangoes would be very less so that the businessman can gain more profits. As you know, when the supply is less in the market, the businessman can earn more and more profits. So, they can wait a while so that the prices may comes down. When the prices comes down, they start buying the mangoes, right? So, therefore, what to understand with this example, right? It's called consumer behavior in demanding a commodity in relation to its price in the market. That we are going to learn the demand and law of demand in this topic. Demand analysis is of most significance to the businessman as it seeks to find out and measures the forces which determine the sales. We shall therefore discuss the basic concept demand and then learn something about the law of demand. Let me first explain what is demand. If you ask a layman what is demand, he says desire for the commodity or need for the commodity. Is this called demand? From economist point of view, the demand has to follow three important conditions. In economics, demand means ineffective demand. It is called effective demand. Demand must be backed by three more conditions to be fulfilled. First and foremost is demand or desire for the commodity. Desire must be backed by capacity, that is the necessary purchasing power to purchase the commodity. And the third one is willingness to pay for it. That is, one should have desire to buy a commodity. He must be willing to pay its price and should have the money to be paid. So what we learned here, the meaning of demand in economics means three conditions. What are those three conditions? A desire for the commodity or service, or second one is ability to pay the price, third one is willingness to pay its price. Example I'll give you, a person may have a desire for a motor car, does not constitute demand, right? Why? Because he is not fulfilling other two conditions, that is ability to pay its price and willingness to pay its price. A person may have a desire for TV, but unless he has enough money to buy it, his desire cannot be said to be a demand. Yes or no? So demand implies the following three conditions. The first one is desire, second is ability to pay its price, and third is willingness to pay its price. We'll move forward. Further, demand is a relative term, always relate to price and per period of time. See, demand for the commodity refers to its quantity purchased at a given price per period of time, say per day, per month, per year, or weekly also. Example I'll give you for that. We can say that Mr. X demand for sugar during a month is 10 kg at rupees 6 per kg. What is this actually? We are relating price as well as time. The time is during a month. During a month, he is demanding 10 kgs of sugar at what price? 6 per kg of price. So this is demand. So always demand relates to price and per period of time. Definition of demand. The demand for the commodity refers to the amount of it which will be bought per period, per unit of time at a particular price. Now we will move it to the second very important topic is demand, individual demand and marketing. See, demand for the product may be viewed at two levels. What are the two levels? Individual demand and market. What is this individual demand? individual demand refers to the demand for the commodity from individual point of view, a family point of view, a household point of view. So here demand, individual demand is a single consumer's entity's demand. Okay. Now what is this market demand? Market demand for a product, on the other hand, refers to the total demand of all buyers taken together. How much quantity the consumer in general would buy at a given price per period of time constitute the market demand for the product. So these are the two types of actually demand, that is individual demand and market demand. Usually under market mechanism, resources would be automatically channelized in producing those goods which have a greater intensity of market demand and consequently higher prices and profitability. Market demand thus serve as a guidepost to the producer in adjusting their supplies in a market economy. So here when we predict the demand or when we forecast the demand, which demand we are considering? Market demand we are considering, not individual demand. So all buyers together demanding a commodity at a particular price on a particular period of time we are considering for market demand. Now we'll move it, very important one, that is the determinants of demand. Demand for many commodities depends on a number of factors. Means the factors which are affecting the demand for the commodity is called determinants of demand. See here, what are the factors? Now, first factor we will consider here is the price of the product. See here, price is always considered a basic consideration in determining the demand for a commodity. Normally what happens? A larger quantity is demanded at a lower price than at a higher price. Yes or no? Yes. So this is one of the basic considerations to be determined for demanding a commodity. The second one is the income of the consumer. Income is an equally important determinant of demand. Obviously, with the increase in income, one can buy more goods. Thus, rich consumers usually demand more and more goods than a poor consumer. Understood? The second factor is taste and habits of the consumer. Demand for many goods depends on the person's taste, habits and preferences. Demand for several products like ice creams, chocolates, bhel puris, etc. depends on the individual taste. Demand for tea, betel or tobacco, etc. is a matter of habit. People with different taste and habits have different preferences for different commodities. A strict vegetarian will have no demand for meat at any price. Yes or no? Yes. Whereas a non-vegetarian who are liking for chicken may demand it even at a higher price. Yes. Similar is the case with the demand for cigarettes for non-smokers and smokers. So this is actually one of the factors. Because of this factor, the demand undergo changes. The next factor is the relative prices of other goods like substitutes and complementary goods. Now, how much the consumer would like to buy of a given commodity, however, also depends on the relative prices of other goods, relative prices of the other goods such as substitutes and complementary goods. Now, what are these substitutory goods? See, when a want can be satisfied by alternative similar goods, they are called substitutes. For example, peas and beans, groundnut oil and til oil, tea and coffee, jawar and bajra. These are the examples. These are substitutes for each other. Example I'll tell you here. The demand for tea depends on the relative prices of its substitutes, that is coffee. If the price of coffee increased, then there will be more demand for tea at a given price. Understood? Now, what are these complementary goods? Similarly, the demand for a product is also affected by complementary product. Before going to the example, let me clear you this concept. See, when in order to satisfy a given want, when in order to satisfy a given want, two or more goods are needed in combination. These goods are referred to as complementary goods. So many examples you can quote here. Say here, car and petrol. These are the complementary goods because these two products needed to travel from one place to another place, right? Pen and ink, tea and sugar, shoes and socks, saris and blouses, gun and bullets, even mobile and batteries, etc. So there are so many examples you can quote here where the demand is correlate or it changes. See here. So these are the complementary to each other. Complementary goods are always in joint demand. Example, I'll give you a fall in prices of cars. A fall in prices of cars will lead to an increase in the demand for petrol and vice versa. Understood? So this is one of the factors which is affecting the demand for the commodity. The next factor is the consumer's expectations. See, the consumer's expectations about the future changes in the prices of a given commodity also may affect the demand. For example, when consumer expects its prices to fall in future, they tends to buy less at the present prevailing price. Similarly, if consumer expects its prices to rise in future, they will tends to buy more at present. So this is one of the factors which affects the demand for the commodity. The next one is the advertisement effect. See, in modern times, the preferences of the consumers can be altered by advertisement and sales propaganda. Yes or no? Yes. Although to a certain extent only, but definitely it affects. See here, thus the demand for many products like toothpaste, toilet soaps, washing powder, so many products are there, processed foods, etc. is partially caused by the advertisement effect in a modern man's life. So this is one of the factors which affects the demand. Now, the next factor is the distribution of income and wealth in the community. See, if there is an equal distribution of income and wealth, the market demand for many products of common consumption tends to be greater than in the case of unequal distribution. Yes? The next factor is the inventions and innovation. The introduction of new goods or substitutes as a result of these inventions and innovations in a dynamic modern economy tends to adversely affects the demand for the existing products, which as a result of innovations definitely become obsolete. See, example I'll give you. Due to the advent of computers, typewriters become obsolete. Nobody is going to purchase that, even if reduced price also, no one is going to purchase the typewriter because the new item has introduced into the market. That is the computers. So this is affecting demand for the commodity. The next is the climate or weather condition. See here, demand for certain products is determined by climate or weather conditions. For example, in summer, there is a greater demand for cold drinks, yes, fans, coolers, etc. Yes or no? Similarly, the demand for umbrellas and raincoats, these are seasonal, depends on the actually rainy season, these are being demanded. So, depends upon the season, the demand is going to change. So, this is for the climate or weather condition. The next factor is the custom. Say, demand for certain goods determined by social customs like festivals, etc. For example, during Diwali festival, there is a greater demand for sweets and crackers. And during Christmas, there is a greater demand for cakes. Yes or no? So, depends upon the customs and traditions in the country, the demand is going to change. These are the actually all the factors which affect the demand for the commodity. Now, we will move it to the next topic, that is the demand function. See here, what is this demand function? The functional relationship between the demand for the commodity and its various determinants may be expressed mathematically in terms of a demand function. Thus, here dx, x is the commodity, the functional relationship between the quantity demand at x and all its determinants, that mathematically expressed as a demand function. The relationship between the demand for the commodity and its all determinants in relation to all determinants is called a demand function. See here, so many factors what we discussed just now, that is prices of the product, income of the consumer, taste and preferences of the consumer, all these are the factors. So these are all determinants. The relationship between the demand and all its determinants, that mathematically expressed as demand function. Actually the above the stated demand function is a complicated one. Again, factors like taste and unknown variables are not quantifiable. We cannot measure it. That is the reason the economists therefore adopt a very simple statement of demand function, that is assuming all other determinants remain constant except a price to be constant. Thus, an oversimplified and the most commonly stated demand function is dx is the function of P, that is the price of the commodity. Connotes that the demand for the commodity X is the function of its price. So this actually demand function is very important when we learn the law of demand, because the law of demand is based on this demand function where all the other determinants remain constant except price and demand. Now we'll move it to the next topic, that is the demand schedule. So here a tabular statement of price quantity for a commodity is known as demand schedule. There are two types of demand schedule, that is individual demand schedule and market demand schedule. What is this individual demand schedule? A tabular list showing the quantities of a commodity that will be purchased by an individual at various prices in a given period of time, say per day, per week, per month or per annum, is referred to as individual demand schedule. Now if you see the PPT here, there is the price quantity relationship were depicted here. The price of the commodity has given as 30, 40. When you see here, there is an inverse relationship here, it is depicted here. When there is 60, it is only 2. When it is coming to 40, it is demand is coming down 3, like that. So here when the price decreases, the demand increases. When the price increases, demand decreases. This is the inverse relationship. So it seeks to illustrate the principle that most of the commodity is demanded at a lower price than at a higher one. In fact, it shows an inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. So this is individual, from individual point of view. Now what is this market demand schedule? It is a tabular statement narrating the quantities of commodity demanded in aggregate by all buyers in the market at different prices in a given period of time. If you see the PPT here, the price is given here and 3 consumers we have taken in a horizontal way. Consumer A, B and C, and we are adding all these 3 consumers and we are writing the market demand here. So when the price is 25 and the demand here is 21, when the price increases like 26, demand decreases. There is an inverse relationship it is showing in market demand schedule. So apparently the market demand schedule is constructed by the horizontal addition of quantities of various prices shown by the individual demand schedule. It follows that the individual demand schedule, the market demand schedule also depicts an inverse relationship between the price of the commodity and its demand. These are the basic concepts of demand. Now we'll move it to the law of demand, which is very important law in economics. Here, what is this law of demand? I am going to explain you in detail. The law of demand means the general tendency of consumer behavior demanding a commodity in relation to the changes in its price is described by the law of demand. The law of demand expresses the nature of functional relationship between 2 variables only of the demand relation. What are those 2 variables? The price and the quantity demanded, and all the other determinants remain constant. Now we'll see what is this statement of the law. See, the law may be stated that other things being equal. What do you mean by other things being equal? Means all other determinants should remain constant except price and quantity demanded. See here, the higher the price of a commodity, the smaller is the quantity demanded, and lower the price, the larger the quantity demanded. This is the statement of the law. If you see market demand schedule and market demand curve, that imaginary data we have actually plotted here. Explanation of the law of demand is given here. The law of demand is usually referred to the market demand always. The law of demand can be illustrated with the help of a market demand schedule. That is, as the price of the commodity decreases, the corresponding quantity demanded for that commodity increases and vice versa. You can see here the market demand schedule and market demand curve here. So here this is the market demand schedule, where when the prices decreases, the demand for the commodity increases, and the same points we plotted on graphical presentation, and the demand curve, it's visible here, and it is downward sloping from left to right, indicating there is an inverse relationship between the price of the commodity and its demand. So here, the market demand schedule in the above table represent a hypothetical demand schedule for a commodity. We can read off from this table that with a fall in the prices at each stage, the demand tends to rise. There is an inverse relationship between a price and quantity demanded. Usually, economist draws a demand curve to give a pictorial presentation of the law of demand. When the data of schedule are plotted graphically, you can see the demand curve, which shows a downward sloping demand. DD is the downward sloping demand curve, indicating an inverse relationship between the price and quantity demanded. I think everyone understood with this explanation of the law of demand, but I told you this law of demand is conditional. It is based on some conditions. What are those conditions? That conditions are also called assumptions underlying the law of demand. So what are those assumptions of the law of demand? We are going to learn here. The above stated law of demand is conditional. It is based on certain conditions as given. Thus, it is always stated with other things being equal under the ceteris paribus assumption. It relates to the change in price variable only, assuming other determinants of the demand to be constant. The law of demand is thus based on the following ceteris paribus assumptions. Now we'll learn detail what are those assumptions here. The first one is no change in consumer's income. See, throughout the operation of the law, the consumer's income should remain constant. If the level of buyer's income changes, he may buy more even at a higher price, invalidating the law of demand. Yes, understood. So the income of the consumer should remain constant. The next is no change in consumers' preferences. If the consumers' preferences changes, the demand for the commodity also it changes here. As just now we discussed here, the habits and taste of the consumer, preferences of the consumer should remain constant. If his taste changes, let's suppose he is not actually liking chocolate today and going for the other commodity like ice creams, preferences have changed, the demand for ice creams increases, the demand for coffee decreases. So it invalidating the law of demand. If he is liking that taste, that particular commodity, whatever may be the price, he is ready to buy it. So this preferences of the consumer should not change. Otherwise, it invalidates the law of demand. The next is the consumer taste, habits and preferences should remain constant. Even the consumer's taste, preferences, just now we discussed, should remain constant. Otherwise, it invalidates the law of demand. The next is no change in fashion. Just now we discussed this is one of the factors which affects the demand for the commodity. During the entire operation of the law of demand, the fashion should remain constant. At a given fashion only, the price decreases, demand should increase, or when the price increases, demand should decrease. This happens only if that fashion is intact, as at a given fashion only. If fashion changes means it invalidates the law of demand. So next one is if the commodity no change in the prices of related goods. See, the prices of other goods like substitutes and complementary remain unchanged. If the prices of other related goods change, the consumer's preferences would change, which may invalidate the law of demand. Already we discussed here substitutes and complementary goods. Yes, if the prices of substitutes and complementary goods changes means the demand for the other commodity is going to change it. Just now we discussed tea and coffee, car and petrol. Yes, so here it should remain constant. And next assumption is no expectations of future price changes or shortages. The law says that the buyers do not expect any shortages in the supply of the commodity in the market. and consequent future changes in the prices. The given price change is assumed to be final at a time. Understood? So here no changes or no expectation of future prices changes in the market in the future or shortages. Then only this law is validated. Otherwise it invalidates the law of demand. The next one is the no change in the range of goods available to consumers. Means this implies that there is no inventions or innovations or new arrival of varieties of product in the market. When the new inventions or some new product arrived in the market, what happens? It distorts our preferences. We may buy more of a commodity at even at high price also we are ready to buy it. So this is distort the consumer preferences and it invalidates the law of demand. So here the factor is no change in the innovations. Next factor is the no change in government policies. See here, the level of taxation and fiscal policy of the government remains the same throughout the operation of the law. So these are the factors which what we consider here should remain constant throughout the operation of the law to operate. Then only the law of demand operates, otherwise it invalidates. Now we'll move it to the next concept that is very important one, exceptions to the law of demand or exceptional demand curve. So it is almost a universal phenomena of the law of demand that when the prices falls, the demand expands and it contracts when the price rises. But sometimes what happens, it may be observed, though of course very rarely, that with a fall in price, the demand also falls. And when the rise in prices, demand also rises. This is a paradoxical situation which apparently in contrary to the law of demand. These cases of tendency is observed are referred to as exceptions to the general law of demand. The demand curve for such cases will be typically unusual. It will be an upward sloping demand curve as shown here in the slide here. When the price increases, demand increases. When the price decreases, demand decreases. So DD is the demand curve which slopes upwards from left to right. It appears that when OP1 is the price, OX1 is the demand. When the price rises to OP2, the demand expands to OX2. Thus, the upward sloping demand curve expresses a direct functional relationship between price and demand. There are few such exceptional cases which may be categorized as follows. The first one is the Giffen goods. So, in the case of certain inferior goods called Giffen goods, when the prices falls, quite often less quantity will be purchased than before because of the negative income effect and people's increasing preferences for superior commodity with a rise in their real income. For example, cheap potatoes, cheap bread, pakka rice, etc. These are the example where when the prices falls means demand also falls. The next one is the article of snob appeal. Sometimes what happens in the market, certain commodities are demanded just because they happens to be very expensive or prestige goods and have a snob appeal. Like for status symbol which is purchased by rich people. For example, diamond or very expensive cars, etc. Thus, when the prices of such article rises, the demand also rises. The next exception is the speculations. See here, when people speculate in changes in the prices of the commodity in the future, they may not act according to the law of demand at present. For example, some people tends to buy more shares, you know, the share market, shares when their prices are rising in the hope that the rising trends would continue so that they can make a good fortune in future. Understood? So this is one of the exceptions. The next exception, the last one, what we are going to deal with it is consumer psychological bias or illusion. Sometimes what happens when the consumer is wrongly biased against the quality of a commodity with the price changes. He may contract his demand for that commodity with a fall in price. Example, Some sophisticated consumers do not buy when there is a stock clearance sale at a reduced prices, thinking that the goods may be of bad quality. So because of these actually reasons, what happens? The demand may not contract when the prices may not contract when the price increases. So this is the law of demand and exceptions to the law of demand. So I'll conclude here. We learned that the demand curve slope downwards under all normal conditions. In exceptional circumstances only it can be otherwise. When it slopes downwards from left to right, it indicates that more and more quantities of goods and services are demanded at lower prices. When consumer demand more of a commodity at lower prices, it takes the shape of a downward sloping demand curve. Okay. Now, the nature of the inverse relationship stressed by the law of demand forms one of the best known and most significant laws in economics. So, the demand analysis has the following important managerial purposes like sale forecasting, production planning, cost analysis, and financial planning, and pricing and manipulation of other demand variables such as promotions and advertisement, and resources on inventory management. So these are the managerial purposes which demand analysis are used. And some questions also there for the exams, you can prepare it. That is the meaning of demand in economics, what is individual demand and market demand, why does this demand curve slope downwards to right, and what is this demand function, and explain the law of demand and any exceptions to this law. So these are some very important questions for your references. Thank you very much.